How likely is it that pre-Christian Norsemen used hallucinogenic plants in their rituals? Did the Vikings get high on magic mushrooms? Shamanism, both modern and ancient, is a practice which has a great deal of interest among modern Western populations. Spiritual traditions of pre-Christian Europe peoples are of real interest to modern Europeans, and the diaspora, with much ink shed on the subject. I am aware that other writers on European traditions have tackled this issue, but I have chosen not to refer to their work in this field, relying instead on the source material, archaeology, and supporting work done in anthropology and works on shamanism in general. So what is known about the pre-Christian beliefs of Northern Europe? Well, enough exists to make evidence assertions, and yet there is so little evidence that most assertions can be reasonably refuted. Both shield maidens and berserkers can be evidence from sagas and histories, yet both can easily be dismissed as embellishments and the works of fantasy. Human belief, ritual and spiritual outlook is a slippery enough subject even in modern literate times. We are dealing with a culture which ended 1,000 years or more before our time, whose stories were written down by people who did not share their beliefs, and who lived themselves hundreds of years after the last heathen societies converted. There was a pantheon of Aryan gods worshipped across the Eurasian world. In the north they are known to us as Odin, Thor, Loki, Freya, and a host of others. In the Germanic world, these Aesir gods shared their pantheon with the gods and goddesses of a fertility cult. How this came to be is beyond the scope of this piece, but it is sufficient that these beings are attested to in archaeology and poetic devices, which means that they were a real phenomenon in Norse heathenry. These beings also seem to have been worshipped alongside an animist belief in land spirits, elves, and localized spirits in the manner more or less common to rural peoples worldwide. Though unlikely to have been so formalized, the result may have been something akin to the Shinto-Buddhist spirituality of Japan. Religious practice certainly consisted of rituals marking the stations of the year, similar to what we can see today in mainstream society, but probably conducted with more sincerity. Harvest festivals, the Easter Fertility Festival, Yule, and so on. This marks the community bonding aspect of ritual practiced by all societies, including our own. Alongside this more mainstream religion was witchcraft and a practice called Seder. The word Seder was translated by the Brothers Grimm to mean seethe, in the sense of boil. Interestingly, the etymology of the word shaman also means seethe or boil. Seder and witchcraft were seen as being somewhat less official, and indeed was subject to both restriction and then violence by later Scandinavian kings. How much interplay with mainstream heathenry and Seder there was is hard to tell at this remove. The Oseberg tapestry, found in the famous ship burial, contains very strong shamanic elements, and was almost certainly associated with an elite Viking figure. Viking war figures were known to have held pacts with entities, and myths and legends themselves are filled with strong shamanic themes of shape-shifting and travelling. A witch or visionary was employed by the entire community in Greenland for her insight. It is also worth noting that both witchcraft and Seder were associated with women, though in a later purge a great many men were killed. Seder was considered unmanly, indeed Loki excoriates Odin. But once you practiced Seidon Samsi, and beat the drums as witches do. In the likeness of a wizard you journeyed among mankind, and that I thought the hallmark of a pervert. It is hard to say whether the Norse thought that this carried the modern sense of being a pervert, or rather in those more robust times it simply meant being a bit too clever, not direct, or just downright sneaky. Archaeology has uncovered many pieces of jewellery with shamanic themes, especially of waterfowl, in addition to rattles and other paraphernalia still used in modern shamanic cultures. Combined with the literary sources, it is safe to say that some kind of shamanism was practiced in Norse communities, as it was in neighbouring Sami communities until recent times. Shamanism, as writers like David Lewis Williams and Graham Hancock have argued, is the oldest expression of spirituality known to humanity. Almost certainly the impulse that drove Ice Age Europeans to create unspeakably mysterious and incredible works of art deep in the earth was what we might call shamanic in origin. Pretty much universal amongst primitive societies, the cosmology and practices of shamanism are remarkably consistent. Of course, over great spans of space and time, there is divergence, but in general, the broad outline is shared, and indeed there are very specific ideas that are near universally expressed. The role of the shaman themselves is regarded as an intermediary between humans and a spirit world, the shaman often functioning as a seer or healer. Often the shaman goes through dreadful ordeals, both physically and in the spirit world, and it is certainly not a path for the weak-minded or faint-hearted. Consistent to all shamanic cultures is a belief in a multiple world cosmos. the imagery of the double helix, entopic phenomena, spinning tunnels, hatchings and so on, and at deeper levels meetings with therianthropes, that is half-human, half-animal creatures, and conscious though ambivalent entities. Shamanism, as practiced by indigenous peoples, is almost certainly not a postmodern neo-religion of kumbaya and platitudes. Indeed, the meetings with spirits are often terrifying and exercise a great deal of mental and even physical torment on the shamans. The experiences that a shamanic practitioner encounters may be induced by a number of means: drumming, fasting, painful ordeals, isolation, and through chemicals. Lewis Williams and other researchers have managed to induce the experiences in laboratories using a variety of methods. All methods are caused by stimulating the brain to produce its own endogenous hallucinogen, dimethyltryptamine. Archaeologist Paul Band centered his argument against Lewis Williams' shamanic hypothesis for the origin of cave art on the purported absence of suitable psychedelics in Ice Age Europe, while Lewis Williams reacted to claims that he had not experienced a shamanic journey by claiming that he didn't want to fry his brain. It is interesting that both men overlook the wide range of methods employed to incite this phenomenon, and perhaps speaks to our own culture's obsession with the drug war and the quick-fix nature of this pharmacological age. Despite what many proponents of hallucinogens say, very few indigenous groups do actually use plants to induce shamanic trances, and instead use isolation, drumming, and other techniques. We have stated the case that there was likely a shamanic aspect to the heathen religion of the Norse cultures, an argument that is widely accepted and not too controversial. Sadly, we are lacking both the archaeological evidence of a bowl of magic mushrooms, or the saga Ragnar ate a magic mushroom and visited the Clockwork Elves, so what is available? In Jarl's saga, the decision about whether to adopt Christianity was finally taken by a man who went into isolation and wrapped himself in a blanket to achieve a kind of isolation tank. This was a technique also used later in Scotland and Ireland for inspiration. Devoid of outside stimulation, the brain creates entopic phenomena, shapes and lights before the eyes. These can morph into tunnel-like effects, and at deeper levels lead to powerful hallucinations. There was an animal dance performed by Varangian guards in Byzantium, which was thought to be linked to a warrior animal cult. Archaeological finds of burnt bear claws and other iconography also hint at animal warrior cultic practices. Odin is attested to have suffered many agonizing ordeals for wisdom, hanging himself for the runes, and drumming with the witches on Samsi. As stated, rattles and shamanic effects are also known in archaeology, so there is some evidence for the physical methods of shamanism. As for plants, there is a dramatic image of a mushroom on the Oseberg tapestry, among much shamanic imagery, and I have read that the Icelandic word for the fly agaric mushroom is berserker, though this is proven very hard to confirm. It is widely believed that the Greek Eleusinian mystery was based on a hallucinogenic drink, but hallucinogenic use in Europe is more implied and suspected until recent times. Certainly Siberians used agaric mushrooms, though through most of Europe grow safer psilocybin mushrooms. The first recorded use of psilocybin mushroom in modern times was the accidental poisoning of a family in Green Park, London, 1799. It is interesting that this use took place in a major city during the Industrial Revolution. It is unlikely that a rural family would have made the same mistake. Fly agaric mushrooms, however, are associated with fairies. They can be quite potent, but if used as a smoke or shamanic smudge, their more noxious effects, i.e. throwing up a lot, can be controlled. This put me in mind of the lines from Grimnir's sayings. May he have all's protection, and that of the gods, whoever first quenches the flames, for the worlds lie open for the sons of men, when they lift the lid off the kettles. There is certainly nothing as explicit as a Central American depiction of mushroom cults. A small-scale private mystery cult is implied in the sources pertaining to Norse culture, and in common with many such societies, the mysteries would be jealously guarded. While a plant agent would not be required, I suspect that mushrooms were used by at least some pre-Christian groups, although the practice was probably not all that widespread, and indeed may have been contained within a select religious group. Knowledge of, and probably use of, some kind of hallucinogen, likely mushrooms, makes the most sense in the context of the elements of the sagas and the archaeology, but is so common with much of the past, the mysteries that they knew, they kept to the grave.